Hello, friends. This is Confessions with Amy, and I'm glad you're visiting my channel. Here we share new confessions every day.
6 years ago, I stood outside a worn-down warehouse in East Austin, staring at a sun-bleached banner that read Incubate Lab. It wasn't a company. It wasn't even a startup yet. It was an idea, and a messy one. But I had just been laid off from a digital agency that sold itself to a faceless conglomerate, and I wasn't ready to be another cog. So I made a deal with myself: 1 year. I'd give this 1 year of everything I had. If it didn't become something, I'd walk away. The guy behind the idea was Kalen Morrow. Yes, that Kalen Morrow now, the tech prodigy, the visionary. Back then, he couldn't even keep the lights on. But he had presence. That dangerous kind of charisma that makes you want to believe even when your gut says run. And I believed. I was 26, hungry, stubborn, and stupidly hopeful. There was no contract. No salary. Just a promise: help me build this, and you'll grow with it. I remember laughing when he said that. I wasn't naive. I knew startups chewed people up. But I thought maybe, this one would be different, because I wasn't some intern fetching coffee. I was there, shaping the foundation, writing the strategy, coding when we couldn't afford a developer, pitching investors like the company was already real. And for a while, it worked. I slept on a mattress on the floor of my studio apartment in South Congress, lived off gas station coffee and frozen tamales, and I loved every minute of it. We were building something that felt alive. People started paying attention. Venture capitalists circled. TechCrunch mentioned us in a throwaway article, and Kalen acted like we'd won an Oscar. I didn't care about the credit. I cared about the fire. The raw, feral momentum of building something that only existed in your brain last week and suddenly had users, traction, numbers you could scream about. I started staying later. Saturdays bled into Sundays. My mom called to ask if I was alive. I told her I was doing something important. Somewhere along the way, 1 year became 6. No vacation. No weekends. Just me, Kalen, and the monster we created together. He once told a reporter, "Harper's the engine. I'm just steering the ship." I remember that line because it was the last time he ever publicly acknowledged what I was to the company. The next few years, well, they deserve their own chapter. But that was the beginning. The deal I made with myself that turned into a prison of my own design. And what they never tell you about building something from scratch is this: the more you pour into it, the easier it is for someone else to cut you out of it entirely. They call it grind culture now. Back then, I just called it my life. By year 2, I forgot what weekends felt like. My alarm went off at 5:30 every morning. Gym. Shower. 2 shots of espresso. Office by 7. Kalen usually rolled in around 10, wearing the same vintage denim jacket and acting like deadlines didn't apply to him, because they didn't. That was my job. I kept the train on the tracks, even when we didn't have fuel, passengers, or a damn destination. But I didn't mind. Honestly, I loved it. That's the sick part. There's a high you get when your work becomes your identity. You start to think the suffering is noble. Romantic, even. My friends would invite me out and stop when I stopped saying yes. My apartment became a glorified closet. Every detail of my life shrank around the startup, until there was nothing left of me but the company. I remember one night, around 3 a.m., I was debugging a broken payment system. Kalen was passed out on the office couch, snoring with a half-eaten protein bar on his chest. I hadn't eaten all day. My contacts were glued to my eyes. And still, when I finally fixed the damn bug and the first test payment went through, I whispered out loud, "Hell yes. Still got it." That was enough to keep me going for another week. We moved into a bigger office in year 3. Got our Series A, hired a designer, then a developer, then 5 more developers. I ran ops, product, growth, partnerships, whatever Kalen didn't want to think about. He was the visionary. I was the architect. People started treating him like a god. Investors loved his chaos. They called him raw genius. I knew the truth. His genius only worked because I cleaned up behind him, made sense of the mess, made it real. He dreamed. I delivered. We were a perfect machine. But something shifted when the money got real. Kalen started talking differently in meetings, like he was auditioning for a TED Talk. He got a new haircut. Bought a Tesla he didn't know how to drive. And slowly, he stopped using we. It was all I. I built this. I knew it would work. I hired the best people. I let it go. I told myself it didn't matter. The company was growing. We were winning. That was enough. That had to be enough. But somewhere deep down, in the quiet hours when the Slack notifications stopped and the office went still, a question started whispering. What happens when he decides I'm not useful anymore? I didn't want to hear it. So I worked harder. I learned everything I didn't already know. Finance, hiring, law, analytics, even how to negotiate with patent trolls. I was irreplaceable. I made damn sure of it. Or so I thought. Funny thing about tech darlings, they don't let loyalty slow them down. It was a Thursday. I remember that because Thursdays were usually chaos, investor check-ins, sprint reviews, backlog prioritizations. I was juggling a partner deal with a wearable tech startup out of Vancouver, and our back-end team was 2 weeks behind on a feature Kalen had promised would launch yesterday. At 10:17 a.m., he slacked me. Got a minute? Coffee? That wasn't weird. We'd grabbed coffee together hundreds of times. Sometimes to decompress, sometimes to strategize. I figured we'd be talking through the delay, or maybe prepping for next week's board meeting. But as soon as I saw him sitting outside the cafe across the street, something felt off. He was wearing that navy bomber jacket he only pulled out when he wanted to look polished but not too polished. His phone was flipped face down. No laptop. No notebook. Just him and 2 Americanos already waiting on the table. He smiled when he saw me. That same disarming, shit-eating Kalen smile that had convinced me to jump on board in the first place. Sit, he said. I don't want this to be formal. My stomach sank. That sentence, I don't want this to be formal, is never a good omen. It's what people say when they're about to end something they don't want to admit they're ending. So I sat. I let him talk. Listen, he began, you know how much I respect you. You've been the glue. You made this place what it is. I'll never forget that. Then came the pause. That practiced, pregnant pause that people use to brace you before a gut punch. But we're moving into a new phase. Hypergrowth. Real scaling. And the board's been, well, pushing me to bring in someone with a different level of experience. I blinked at him. Different level of experience. He nodded, avoiding my eyes. Someone who's done it before. At scale. Like Series D stuff. IPO prep. That kind of thing. I stared at him. I didn't say a word. We're bringing in a new COO, he continued. You could stay on in a transition role, chief of staff maybe, if that interests you. Or we can give you a very generous exit. You'd be set for a while. I want to do right by you. That was the moment I realized it was already done. The offer, the new hire, the decision, it had all happened. This wasn't a conversation. It was a notification. And I, the girl who worked through hospital visits, food poisoning, family funerals, earthquakes, power outages, was being handed a latte and a pink slip. I looked at him and said, simply, "Wow." He shifted in his seat, clearly uncomfortable. He expected anger, tears, maybe even a scene. But I didn't give him any of that. Instead, I smiled. A real one. "You know what, Kaylin?" I said, lifting my coffee. "I wish you luck. Truly. You're gonna need it." Then I stood up, walked out, and never looked back. That was the last time I saw him in person. What came next? They weren't ready for that. And honestly, neither was I. I didn't cry. Not on the walk back to the office. Not while packing up my things. Not when I handed my badge to security and they gave me that awkward, almost apologetic nod. There's a strange kind of peace in knowing the worst already happened. You don't have to brace for impact when you've already hit the ground. I got home by 3 p.m. and sat on the edge of my bed like a guest in someone else's apartment. The place looked foreign in daylight. Dust on the windowsill. A stack of unopened mail. A half-full suitcase from a business trip I never unpacked from. My body ached in ways I'd ignored for years. I didn't eat. I didn't sleep. I just lay there, fully dressed, shoes on, for maybe 10 hours. At some point, the silence started screaming. The next day, I turned off every notification on my phone. Texts were coming in. Ex-coworkers. A couple investors I was close to. One of the junior PMs even sent a "WTF just happened" message with crying emojis. I didn't reply. Kaylin never followed up. Of course he didn't. He'd already buried me in his mind. That's how people like him move forward, they edit the story. In his new version, I was a stepping stone. Useful, but replaceable. The kicker. The woman they brought in, Sloane DeMarco, had my strategy deck in her onboarding documents. My processes. My team. My roadmap. The company was still running off my infrastructure. And nobody batted an eye. For 3 weeks, I did nothing. Just stared out my window and let the weight of 6 years of devotion melt off me like a fever breaking. It was grief, plain and simple. You don't spend a quarter of your life building a living, breathing thing and walk away untouched. But around day 20, something shifted. It happened quietly. I was scrolling through an old Google Drive folder and found a doc titled Alt Idea, Personal IP, Do Not Share. I opened it. It was rough. Messy. Just a brain dump from 2 years ago, a product concept I'd shelved because we didn't have time and Kaylin wasn't convinced there was a market. But reading it now, with distance, it clicked in a way it hadn't before. What if I didn't need approval anymore? What if I built this my way? That was the moment the fog lifted. I didn't have money. I didn't have a team. But I had my mind. My skills. My freedom. I made a list that night. Call Yvette, ex-UX lead, recently laid off. Talk to Amari about prototype help. Open new business account. Get domain. Register LLC. Don't tell anyone until it's real. I wasn't trying to prove anything to Kaylin or the board or Sloane or anyone else. I was done building someone else's dream. It was time to build my own. No funding. No press. No co-founder with a flashy resume or TEDx talk under his belt. Just me. I started small. Kitchen table, whiteboard, 12-hour stretches broken only by burnt coffee and the occasional power nap. I told myself I'd give it 6 months, again. But this time, it wasn't desperation driving me. It was something colder. Clearer. Revenge? No. That was too simple. This was reclamation. I called the project arson. Not because it meant anything, but because it didn't. It was clean. Sharp. Hard to mispronounce. Easy to remember. That was the whole point. I built the first prototype in 3 weeks with Amari, an ex-contractor from my old team who'd left 6 months before me, burned out and disgusted by the corporate shift. I paid her with savings I'd hidden from myself in a separate account labeled Emergency Ice Cream. By week 4, we had something. Clunky, buggy, but alive. I looped in Yvette next. We hadn't talked in over a year, but the second she saw the prototype, she sent me a 3-word text. I'm in. Always. She didn't even ask what we were paying her. We couldn't afford her, not really, but she didn't care. She'd seen what I could do. What we could do together. That was enough. We weren't trying to go viral. We weren't pitching VCs. We were building a tool for real people, creators, freelancers, solopreneurs who were tired of being jerked around by bloated platforms and algorithms. Everything I'd hated in the startup world, I was stripping out of this one. No fake urgency. No performative culture. No egos in bomber jackets. Just work. Real work. With real value. And then something funny happened. People started coming to us. A beta user I'd onboard personally posted about us on a niche subreddit. That post got 87 upvotes. Then someone mentioned us in a Twitter thread about lean tools that actually work. Within a week, we had over 500 signups. No launch. No ads. Just word of mouth. And I felt it again, that fire. But this time, it wasn't tied to survival or someone else's praise. It was mine. All mine. One night, around 2 a.m., I was walking home from our borrowed co-working space, hoodie up, earbuds in, when I saw a billboard for my old company, my company, the one I helped build. Kaylin's face was on it. Some tech conference thing. Visionary founder. The slogan underneath said, "You don't get to change the world by playing it safe." I laughed out loud. Because if anyone had played it safe, it was him. Letting go of me. That wasn't bold. That was cowardice dressed as strategy. He didn't realize it at the time, but the day he let me go, he gave me something priceless. Permission. And I wasn't wasting it. The call came on a Tuesday. 4:42 p.m. Unknown number. I let it ring out. Then another. Then an email. Subject, can we talk? From Kaylin Morrow. To Harper Ellison. No body text. Just that cold subject line, like he didn't know how to say the words out loud. Like he wasn't sure he deserved to. I stared at it for a second. Smirked. Then archived it without opening. They'd been trying to reach me for a week at that point. Yvette had caught wind of what was happening through a mutual at my old company. After I left, it took maybe 3 months for everything to start buckling. Turns out the experienced operator they brought in didn't know the systems. Didn't know the people. Didn't know the product. She had experience, sure, at a dozen other companies. None of them were this one. The dev team started bleeding talent. Partners stalled. Users complained. Sloan tried to fix it by scaling processes, but all she was doing was throwing sand on an engine she didn't understand. They thought I was a piece. I was the blueprint. And now they were calling. They didn't want to apologize. They wanted to undo. But I wasn't a bookmark they could flip back to. I wasn't someone's fallback plan. I was building, and they were crumbling. That wasn't karma. That was math. Arson had just crossed 50K active users. We were cash flow positive, on track to hit 6 figures RAR by Q2. I had a team of 9, tight, brilliant, loyal. I wasn't sleeping on a mattress anymore. I was sleeping well. And more than anything, I was free. No one to impress. No one to answer to. No Kalen breathing down my neck, pretending my work was his. People kept asking if I wanted revenge. If I ever thought about walking into one of those overfunded panels he was always moderating and just destroying him. Truth. I didn't care. His world wasn't mine anymore. But a few weeks later, I saw a headline float by. Moro's empire losing ground, COO steps down amid internal shakeup. I clicked it. Just once. The article quoted a former founding team member who described the company's original systems as brilliant, clean, way ahead of their time. They didn't name me. They never do. But I smiled. Because I knew. He knew. The world was finally catching up to what I'd always known. You don't fire the engine and expect the car to keep running. I was never the assistant. I was never the helper. I was the reason it worked. And now, I don't build for men like Kalen. I don't build for applause. I build for myself. And God. It feels good to win quietly.